Hello, my name is Rick Casale. I'm a trustee of carboncopy and your host for this online event. Welcome to my guest speakers. I'll introduce them to you shortly, and we have a couple more joining us momentarily. And welcome to you, our audience. This event is all about inspiration and action and what kind of collective local climate action we can take to address the immediate environment and climate crisis. And this week, we're going to focus on nature-based solutions and see how nature can really transform our local communities. So, first is welcome to Dr. Amir Khan. He is a full-time GP working in inner city Bradford. His passions outside of medicine include wildlife conservation. He's currently working alongside the Bumblebee Conservation and the Butterfly Conservation Trust to launch a new insect A&E campaign. Amir is also an ambassador for the National Wildlife Trusts, working closely with them to ensure access to green spaces for inner city children. And again, welcome, Amir.
Thank you very much.
Paul Nolan is director of the Mersey Forest Project. This ambitious program of environmental regeneration aims to get more from trees, using trees and woodlands to provide local communities and visitors with a wide range of benefits. Paul is also a member of the Institute of Chartered Foresters and chair of the National Community Forest Partnership. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you.
David Elliott is the CEO at Trees for Cities, a charity working at a national and international scale with local communities to cultivate lasting change in their neighbourhoods. He is also a commissioner for the London Sustainable Development Commission, a trustee for the African Conservation Foundation, and previously for the International Tree Foundation. Welcome, David.
Thanks very much, Rick. Great to be here. Thank you.
Dan Merrett is the development manager at Bathscape. Dan has worked in nature conservation for over 20 years. Previous projects include creating new meadows across 60 counties for the Prince of Wales Coronation Meadows Initiative. He currently manages the Bathscape programme, which seeks to ensure that a greater number and more diverse mix of people feel connected to the landscape around Bath. Welcome, Dan. And we may have, fingers crossed, Councillor Asher Craig, who is the Deputy Mayor of Bristol. And when she joins us, I'll introduce you to her properly. So Amir, if we could please start off with you, and if you could set the stage for us. We're obviously focused on nature-based solutions, and what would be good to hear is really what are some of the benefits for us individually, health and wellness benefits of integrating nature into our urban environment and into our lifestyles.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm a GP, so that's my full-time job, and wildlife conservation and access to nature and green spaces is my passion, really. So I'm coming at this at a very much a health benefit approach, and we all know, we're all like-minded people here, so we know that we're outdoor creatures. We've been designed to be outdoors, and all this modern life has made it such that people don't get the access to green space that they need, really, both for their physical health and their mental health. And it's really well researched. There's a really strong correlation between going outdoors in green space and your health and well-being being improved, and that's been well documented. Really big projects have been looking at that, and I'm sure we're all aware of the 120 minutes a week of outdoor activity. And what that relates to really is there was a big study done that was published in Nature magazine, but also in lots of other journals, and people who spent more than any time in nature, really, outside, had significantly better health outcomes than those who didn't. And that even, we say, 120 minutes, 2 hours a week, and that can be spread across the week as you see fit, how is best for you. But even people who were doing less than that had better health benefits than those who spent absolutely no time in nature at all. And we're talking about really palpable health benefits, better cardiovascular disease outcomes, better rates, lower rates of obesity, better rates of type 2 diabetes, lower rates of admissions to hospital from asthma. It was really, really impressive. And what was really interesting about that particular study was that actually the people who lived in inner city areas and had to travel to these green spaces fared better than those who had easy access to green spaces, which highlights some of my passion for inner city people getting into outdoor spaces. I grew up in an inner city. I'm lucky enough now to live in a more rural area, but I recognise very early on that having that access to green space is so important, and particularly to younger people who may not know about the health benefits. So more and more research has been done into that. We know people with early onset dementia fare better if they have outdoor activities as well. Their dementia is being proven to progress at a lower rate if they're outdoors. Vitamin D levels, everybody knows about that, particularly nowadays when there's, better vitamin D levels are associated with better outcomes when it comes to the coronavirus. So that is certainly topical now as well. But really simple things. Our immunity improves when we go out in sunlight. Our sleep cycle is much, much better when we're outdoors and exposed to natural light. And actually, something that might be a carrot for a lot of people, we age better when we spend time outside as well. Older people who spend time outdoors have lower rates of things like osteoarthritis, muscle pains, and again, better sleep. But it's not just older people, younger people as well. Young people with ADHD have better outcomes when they spend time outside. Anxiety and depression, we know that gets better as well. It's not a miracle cure. It's usually alongside, traditional medicine as well. So it's not a miracle cure for all of this, but it works alongside all of that. And things that are less easy to measure, I guess, like life satisfaction and happiness, those levels are reported to be better from people who go outside. And what's good, I guess, is that when we know something's good for us, outdoor space, green space, natural space, we're more likely to conserve it. And that is the link back to conservation. Another angle that I come at it with really is accessing it for people who may not find it easy to access. So not just inner city people, but people from BAME backgrounds as well, who may not find it as easy to access. It may be because they don't see people who look like them in outdoor spaces as much, or on the TV doing natural kind of presenting. So that's also a big part for me. And that's what I do for the Wildlife Trust, really try and encourage inner city and BAME background young people to access green space and benefit from it.
That is a fantastic thing. Amount of content you just crammed into the introduction.
I had a short amount of time, Rick. You made it very clear. So I went for it.
If I can just ask one quick question, I'm sure there will be others that we will also ask towards the end. But can you give us an idea, and then maybe research on this, as to the level of contact that is needed with nature and the natural environment in order to see some of these health benefits that you've mentioned?
Yeah, so it depends on which health benefit you're looking at, particularly mental health, depression and anxiety. There's this magic number of 2 hours a week, but it doesn't have to be 2 hours a week if that doesn't fit into your working week or whatever you do during the week. Like I say, even half an hour every week is better than no time whatsoever to improve mental health. With the physical side of things, the asthma, the diabetes, the cardiovascular disease, you are looking towards the upper end of that 120 minutes. So at least an hour outside a week will help with those. But something is better than nothing. So it's easy to get fixated on and figure a time length and all of that. But anything is better than nothing.
And you hear anecdotally, and this may actually be backed up by research, that sometimes you don't even need to actually be outdoors, and merely seeing nature and seeing things through your window can have psychological benefits. Is that true?
That is true, and it is evidence-based as well. There was a study done in America looking at people who were in hospital, inpatients in hospital, and those who had a window view of trees actually were discharged a day earlier than those who didn't have a green view with the same conditions. So it was done equally in that way. So yes, just having a view of something outdoors, and there will be lots of people who don't have gardens, who don't have very immediate access to green spaces, but window boxes, balconies, all of that kind of stuff can be made into green areas that can have some benefit on your mental health.
Fantastic. We will definitely come back to you after the other speakers. Thank you.
Sure.
Paul, if I can turn to you, as I said in my introduction, that the Mersey Forest is a very ambitious and long-term environmental regeneration project. But fundamental in its aims is this vision of getting what you call more from trees.
Yeah.
And it would be really interesting for you to explain what the thinking behind this idea, and then to bring it to life for us.
Yeah, I'll certainly try. So, firstly, thanks for inviting me onto this, and great to hear Amir's distillation of all that great evidence. I think the Mersey Forest tries to deliver some of those benefits to communities who are potentially lacking in green spaces. So the Mersey Forest was set up in a place which includes Liverpool, some of the industrial northern towns like Widnes, St Helens, Warrington, Northwich, etc. So places which suffered quite a lot in the 80s from loss of industry, loss of jobs, dereliction, and the Mersey Forest was seen as a way to try to improve the quality of the landscape, provide access for people close to where they live. And we developed this idea that the tree planting in many ways is quite simple. What we actually want is more from those trees. We don't just want to stick trees in the ground and walk away and pat ourselves on the back. So our aim and objective over the past 25 years has been to use that opportunity to plant trees to deliver health benefits. So we have something called the Natural Health Service, which aims to use some of those spaces to treat mild depression, to get people more active, to help manage weight and those sorts of things. To work with schools, to create forest schools, to encourage outdoor learning, but also to improve social interaction between kids, to improve behaviour. We've got really good evidence of the impacts of that, so getting way more from trees with our young people. We also want to use our opportunity to help tackle climate change, obviously a key issue for all of us. So how do we both mitigate potential climate change, but also adapt to what's already built into the system? So we do a lot of work around helping to cool cities by planting more trees for the cooling benefit that they provide, and a huge amount on reducing flood risk through natural flood management. So that's either incorporating sustainable urban drainage systems into towns and cities, or going up into the hills, up into the catchment to try to slow the flow of water before it gets into our towns and cities. So that reduces flood risk, and flooding in itself has a huge health impact as well. So there's really good evidence of the psychological impact of flooding on communities, that fear, that potential economic impact, but also the social impact as well. And we also try to get more from trees in terms of improving biodiversity. So lots of our towns and cities have lost green spaces, so we're trying to recreate them and connect spaces so that biodiversity has an opportunity to thrive. The thing I wanted to say, I manage a small team who deliver the forest plan, but we do this in collaboration with a huge array of different partners. So none of this happens without lots and lots of people working together over a very long time period. And I think that's really important to say, that none of us can do it on our own, and it's only through shared endeavour with the health sector, with education, with those responsible for designing cities that we get these things done. And as we look forward, our key focus for us will be increasingly how to get more from trees to support climate action. And fundamentally, we're also about creating places that people cherish. So we are trying, we involve local communities. We want them to take pride in their place and to feel that they have created something local that they can be proud of. And we don't know the answers and maybe not even know the right questions to ask, but we're interested in what the psychological impact of improvement in quality of place is, particularly when that's driven by local communities. So how do we create those new stories for these places?
Well, I mean, I'm very interested in how what you're doing fits within the local council's climate action plan. So the context for all of us is changing insofar as many more councils now across the country have declared a climate emergency. They've got climate action plans, and yet there are fantastic initiatives and programs that have been in place for a lot longer. And it'd be interesting to hear if there's some kind of a golden thread that connects a lot of the initiatives that you're doing and the objectives that you have with what I imagine are very similar objectives and outcomes for a council's local climate action plan.
Yeah, definitely. So part of what we do is to try to influence policy. So obviously we are talking to all the councils about their climate emergency action plans and making sure that the adaptation and mitigation benefits of what we're doing, and also that involvement of people as an opportunity to help get the message across about climate action is built into their plans. And they see the Mersey Forest as being an excellent vehicle to help them deliver strands of their project. So there's a very, very clear thread from their policy all the way down to us delivering trees in a local school project, helping kids to connect with nature and getting the message across about the need for action.
Yeah. And I have just a question from the audience. Someone that is interested in accessible landscapes for people with disabilities or long-term conditions. What are some of the things that you are doing deliberately to be inclusive in that way?
Yes, so it's making sure that we talk to the right people and follow the right sorts of design guidance to make places as accessible as we possibly can. We are creating new woodlands very close to people and working with communities to ensure that they value them but have access to them as well. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you very much. That was a great overview of what is a very ambitious and multi-pronged program. Thank you. Let me just check. Is Asha, can you hear me? Oh, I think she might still be troubleshooting in the corner there. Okay, well, we'll see if we can come back to Asha a little bit later. And if I could move on, please, to David, who is heading up Cities for Trees and focuses perhaps more so than Paul, perhaps in urban areas.
Trees for Cities, we've been operating now for about 27 years. We're pretty well established. We were set up originally in London, actually, as Trees for London, with a small group of people who saw a need for more trees on our streets, and really just started to raise money themselves through parties and doing some guerrilla planting on the streets of London, and that it seemed to gain momentum pretty quickly, and realised there were lots of like-minded people actually in the city who wanted to do similar things, and so from there we grew and obviously registered and formalised as a charity. We now these days, a few years later, we're now obviously Trees for Cities, and we work across the country and do have some international projects as well, as you mentioned. So we work every year. The numbers of towns and cities we work in changes, but it's around 30 different towns and cities across the country that we tend to work in. I mean, a lot of what Paul has said and Amir has said is absolutely at the heart of what we do as well. Very much the principles of community forestry is runs through everything we do. So I'll try not to repeat too much of what Paul and Amir have said, but add a few extra aspects, I suppose, of what we specifically focus on. I guess our hotspot is those areas of towns and cities where social and environmental deprivation overlap, and as you're probably aware, those areas, there is often a very close correlation between the two. Areas that are where there's less access to green spaces, less access to even seeing greenery on your streets, often have the worst social health indicators, etc. So that we try to focus our work in those places. It's not always quite as simple as that, but that really is what we aim to do. For the multiple benefits that trees and green spaces bring us, which again Amir and Paul have talked about. So there's the ecosystem service benefits, particularly more and more related to climate change adaptation around flooding, urban heat island effect, absorption of carbon, etc. Also, some noise pollution is a big one in London. The health and well-being benefits, which again I won't go through. Amir's talked so deeply about that, and that's a big driver of what we do. I suppose the other two main areas for us are around community cohesion. Our work is heavily delivered through people, volunteers. We'll often have hundreds of people coming out on any one project day to plant those trees from very, very wide, diverse backgrounds. The beauty, particularly in London, and that's where a lot of our work is London, but a lot of what I see is in London. The places that we're working in, you have an amazing array of people coming out, age groups, ethnicities, etc. We really do seem to appeal to that wide group, which is fantastic. We need to do more and more of that. That's critical for the sector as a whole. And the other piece really that I think gets lost a bit too much these days is more about the cultural and the aesthetic value of the trees and the green spaces. I think we talk a lot about ecosystem services and natural capital, etc. But actually, I think ultimately what most people love about their trees and green spaces is what it brings for them in a more softer perspective, how it looks, how it feels, the cultural links, the spiritual links, the historical links, how it relates back to your own childhood, etc. And all of that, I think, is what we're trying to capture as well. So we do projects in parks, housing estates, schools, woodlands, on the streets, in hospitals, a wide range of different project types, small trees, big trees. There's not one type of project we do. And we're not landowners, unlike some organisations. We don't go and purchase land, and I wish we had the finances to do that, but we don't, unfortunately. We work through existing landowners, which primarily are local authorities and schools. So with local authorities, we will approach some local authorities, and we'll get some approaches, and we raise funding from different sources of funding. Some usually ask for some contribution from local authorities towards that. And then we can use those opportunities as funding opportunities to really scale up what local authorities want to do through their tree plans, their green infrastructure plans, etc. And we'll then do deep community engagement with those communities to hopefully bring people out to do the planting, but also do the maintenance work. The maintenance is a key part. Often we talk about planting, but as important, if not more so, is how those sites are maintained and looked after and kept as high quality green spaces for the future. And that again involves deep community action. With local authorities, we're trying to. You mentioned the sort of the climate declaration side of things. The climate plans for local authorities. We have been trying to contact recently many local authorities. All of those actually have declared a climate emergency, saying, this is what we do. We'd love to do more with you, because ironically, we actually have quite a lot of opportunities. The bottleneck for us is actually finding those opportunities with local authorities, and for the local authorities finding the land that they want to use for these projects. So there's a little bit of a mismatch here. That there's a lot of talk, there's a lot of momentum in one sense, but actually when it comes to delivering those projects, finding the land, securing it, there is still a bit of a bottleneck. So I'd appeal to local authorities, come to us if you've got projects you want to do, because we might well have opportunities to match you up with. Schools is the second major landowner that I mentioned that we work with. Fundamentally, what we're trying to do is reconnect kids, or connect kids with nature, get them outside, get them understanding nature, get them comfortable with nature. Whatever they do within nature is going to be good for them for so many lifelong benefits, and also to hopefully convert them into the environmentalists of the future. And so we do that through different lenses. It might be that we have a project that's focused on healthy eating by growing healthy food in schools, by creating raised bed systems, and that's particularly useful in inner city schools where there's very little access often to existing soft green space, that we can build new structures within schools to do so. Or it might be through the air quality aspect. Trees and air quality, there's a lot of links there. There's a lot of work to do to fully understand the link, and there's a risk of overplaying it. But trees can have a meaningful impact on localized air quality. So we do planting, greening to improve localized air quality. But again, a lot of it's actually about using that as a focal point to actually get children involved in green projects in those schools. Big question for us is how to scale that work. How do we do more and more of it? Because there are so many schools out there, so much demand, so many children, and how do we reach all of those children in a meaningful way with the very limited budgets that are still available to the environment sector as a whole? It is a very, very poorly funded sector in reality, even though there is so much talk about the nature and the climate emergencies. I'm just going to finish on one thing we're really trying to do with communities at the moment is to create what we call a sort of bottom-up approach. So we would describe our work as historically quite top-down. We arrange projects, we fundraise for them, we put them on, and obviously we invite people to come and participate. But actually what we want to do more is have people be able to do that themselves. So to provide the resources, the mechanisms, the training, the impetus, the momentum, so people can actually go out there and find a space that they want to regenerate, talk to their local authority, know who to talk to, know where to access the trees, the funding, the know-how to do so, and actually do it themselves. And that for us is the sort of the viral effect of what we do. So it's combining the top down and the bottom up approach is really the future for us, and what strategically we're looking to move into next. That's a big challenge, but we're, for example, looking to we're creating a sort of an online hub at the moment for resources that people can access, individuals or community groups can access those sort of resources, and actually go off there and do it themselves. So lots going on, huge opportunities, and as I say, we are looking, if there's local authorities online at the moment, we are looking always for projects, so please do come to us and talk to us about it.
And David, like you say, there's a huge amount going on. It's an interesting question which has come up while you were talking. The climate emergency obviously is a relatively short timescale compared to potentially how long it takes to grow these trees and for some of the climate mitigation and sequestration of carbon benefits. So how does that timescale affect tree planting plans and choices?
I mean, from a sequestration perspective, yes, ideally we were planting these trees 10, 20, 30 years ago, but we're now focusing on it. There's a huge fight. The government is released, or hopefully is releasing, significant funding towards solutions based on trees. But yes, it's going to take years, really, for the large amounts of carbon to be locked into those trees. They do even in the first few years start to lock in a relatively decent amount of carbon, but actually it's not a linear scale. It's not the same every year, and there are certain periods of growth where carbon is absorbed better than in other periods. But there's a lot of thinking, there's a lot of work on that, a lot of discussion, a lot of the community forest structure I know is going to be doing a lot around that over the coming years. But yeah, I mean, there is a lag period. That's the reality. We can't just rely on trees to solve our climate issue. That would be very naive. It can play a mid to long term role, but we have to be doing other short term interventions, whether that's sort of decarbonising our housing stock, decarbonising the streets, etc. That's in the short term. That's what we have to do immediately to draw down those carbon levels. But the trees, are going to play more of that medium to long term role.
Yeah, thank you. And clearly there's a very strong connection between what you're doing and the programs that you want to put in place and what local climate action plans look like for various councils. So there's a clear point of connection there. Thank you very much. If I can turn to Dan, and then hopefully we'll be able to speak with Asha afterwards. Dan, just to recap, you're focused on Bathscape. And Bathscape is a very unique program. It really is, to my mind, trying to blur the boundaries between urban landscape and natural landscape, and make the landscape much more accessible to people around Bath. Can you actually kind of get into the details of that and what that actually looks like in practice and some of the programs that you've put in place?
Yeah, sure. So the Bathscape, we're a landscape partnership. We consist of 12 member organisations that came together a few years ago to try and connect people with the natural landscape surrounding Bath and to better coordinate its management. We then applied for funding from the National Lottery Heritage Fund, excuse me, and others. And we now have a 5-year scheme that contains 25 projects, and we have it under the themes of conserving and restoring the countryside, improving health, enjoyment of the outdoors, increasing access opportunities, and also offering learning, training and skills provision. We have focused on areas of highest need, like a lot of the other projects you're hearing from. Although Bath is generally an affluent place, there are significant areas of deprivation within the project area that fall within the highest 10% of deprivation across the country. And with access to green space, as Amir was saying earlier, this kind of link to health inequalities as well. So we focus some of our work, such as schools work and green prescription. We work with GPs in those areas to prescribe people to get out and become active in the outdoors and get involved in conservation to try and health benefits. And we concentrate solely in our areas of deprivation for that. And generally we try and hold a lot of our events within those parts of the city and the surrounding area. Overall, we recognise the value to health and well-being through connection to nature.
Hey, can you hear me?
We're very fortunate in Bath. It's a landscape city. Effectively, what we mean by that essentially is a city where landscape and sensibly balance the scale and the influence of buildings. In terms of the climate emergency, the scheme genesis predates the climate emergency declaration, but we're based at the council of Bath and North East Somerset Council, and with their climate emergency incorporating the ecological emergency. It's an area where the council's on the front foot, and the scheme feeds into that. So, for instance, in areas of, say, carbon sequestration through tree planting or grassland management. Okay, so it's also about reaching people, the kind of networking of people and landowners as well within that. So its genesis really was a meeting, a council of key stakeholders around the city. And it was developed with the green infrastructure work that the council's done. And then the process of applying for the lottery money necessitated this kind of two-step process of consultation and bringing more people into tent. But before we had the 5-year funding pot, we had an 8-month development phase where we were consulting, honing our plans. And there we ran a series of pilots activities as well, which informed not only our planning, but also got people active for our pilot works on the ground. We now have a board of 12 stakeholder groups, as I say, which is the council as the lead partner on that. We have the National Trust, Avon Wildlife Trust, Bath Preservation Trust, Residents Association, Cotswold Conservation Board, Nolan Trust, both Bath universities within that. And we collaborate with just about anybody who's external project. We're very well aware that we're time limited, and success in terms of legacy is dependent on that collaboration, taking people with us. So we had this kind of long genesis, setting things up, and during that time, we've now had the climate emergency declaration, coronavirus, and we're kind of constantly reviewing how we can best deliver in the context of those. But we also have an eye on the future. So we was looking to develop a similar project in the Summer Valley, which is south of our area, to kind of roll out this idea of kind of health and outdoors project work. So that's effectively where we are with things. It's about 3 miles circumference from the centre of Bath that we cover. So it's really that kind of fringe of the urban area and how we can encourage people, the green space in the city, and also to explore a little wider and enjoy their countryside.
It's a fantastic program, and I think it's one that can certainly be replicated in other areas and by other towns when they look, like you say, at that urban fringe and how to make that really a point of access, a jumping point into the surrounding landscape.
Yeah, originally it comes under the scheme from the National Lottery Scheme. It was about landscapes, typically like the Peak Districts and areas of the countryside. We were one of the first that included an urban area and set that boundary based on an urban area. So it's the green setting of the World Heritage Site is our extent, but it brings in the people and the wildlife very well.
Great, thank you very much. And we'll come back to you hopefully with some more questions in the Q&A.
My name is Councillor Asher Craig, and I'm Deputy Mayor of Bristol, and I'm also the Cabinet Lead with responsibility for communities, equalities and public health. Parks and Green Spaces has been part of my brief for the last three years, and really excited to let you know a little bit about more about the Green Streets project that we are kicking off here in Bristol. So the council, in partnership with North Somerset Council, were awarded a grant from the Forestry Commission to plant 590 street trees and 10 small woodlands across the city. North Somerset Council will be planting 190 standard trees in their local authority area. In total, we received a grant of around £330,000, of which Bristol's share is £251,000. This pays for the capital cost to purchase, plant and protect trees and maintenance for 3 years. And it's based on a 50% match, which we are largely providing via our amazing volunteer effort across the city. In our bid to the Forestry Commission, we identified 59 tree planting clusters, including 10 potential tree planting locations. Each cluster is in an area of low tree canopy cover and higher deprivation, where a grass verge fronts the road or property. In total, we have selected 14 wards across the city. I was hoping to share a map to show you the 59 tree planting clusters that we have identified, but unfortunately I won't, just in case it all goes wrong. The project is indeed now live. It was delayed for the last 2-3 months due to COVID-19. So we're currently playing catch up. Our partners, the Forest of Avon Trust, have been commissioned to undertake community engagement and consultation as part of the project. And we are hopeful that communities will be very supportive of our tree planting plans. And given the upsurge that we have seen in the usage of our parks and green spaces and a real appreciation for trees in our city during this crisis, I'm sure that won't be a problem, but we do need to listen to people's views and we need to consult. The Bristol Tree Forum will also be lending their support through their network of tree champions. The Forest of Avon Trust have also drafted a web page on which will sit information about the programme, and this is due to go live when the engagement process starts in July. We have completed all the technical checks, mostly underground services, and we're in the process of confirming whether we can progress all 590 locations to consultation. The grant requires that we plant 590 street trees between November 2020 and March 2021. And of the 10 woodlands, we planted 8 last winter, and we've already received a grant for this. And these were all delivered under our One Tree Per Child initiative that has been running now for about 4 or 5 years. We're also going to be trialing a few new approaches, including visualizations, which will help people to see what these new trees will look like. We will set out the benefits of trees based on iTree, so how much air pollution trees can remove from the air. And we're also going to be supporting people to get involved in planting and caring for their trees, including a community tree watering scheme, which is based on a successful approach undertaken in the London Borough of Lewisham. The plan is for us to partner with our own company, Bristol Waste, to collect unwanted watering cans that we can donate to residents who are willing to water the trees. We have an in-principle offer from Bristol Waste to do this, but we're going to progress the detail. And the watering cans won't be needed until spring 2021, so we have time. We anticipate that not all locations will be available for tree planting, either due to technical constraints like underground services or lack of support, which I somehow doubt. But we are really hopeful that the Forestry Commission will accept substitute sites if we have to think of others. There is some risk that if we don't get enough support to look after the trees, for example, to water them, that is a risk that we're willing to take. But as I said before, during this COVID crisis, the spirit, the volunteering spirit and kindness that has been shown, we want that to continue. So I'm really hopeful that we won't have those issues as the scheme rolls out. So like I said, COVID has delayed our engagement. So we're holding some risk here. But like I said, we're really hopeful that we want to develop that real community spirit. And I think I'm going to leave it there, it gives you a brief overview. One thing I should say though, just before I step down, the Urban Tree Challenge Fund really provided Bristol with a great opportunity to show the action that we want to take towards doubling Bristol's tree canopy cover, which is a one city plan target by 2046. As we know, tree planting increases resilience in our city's green infrastructure and provides a whole wealth of benefits. Planting trees helps mitigate climate warming. As we know, trees absorb and store carbon dioxide. So we're really excited that we were one of the successful cities, we're ready and rearing to go. So thank you.
Thank you very much to Asha. And just so you know, she actually unfortunately couldn't see us, so she was actually just kind of sharing that initiative with us, but unfortunately we won't be able to get her involved in the Q&A. the reason why Asher was part of the panel is because Bristol is one of the front runners in terms of its ambition at a council level. It's one of the councils that wants to be carbon neutral by 2030, and they do have a very impressive one city plan, which involves a fairer society and one which is also sustainable, and nature's a key element within that. And really, as we heard, and as I'd like people to take away, the integration of nature-based solutions is a fundamental component to a lot of these climate emergency plans that councils are putting together. So thank you very much, Asher, and I'm sorry we had some technical glitches. I'd like to just move on and get to some of the Q&A. We've had some really interesting mix of questions. And Amir, if I can just jump straight back to you, please. In my introduction, I mentioned that one of the things that you are doing is you are very active on our current campaign, Insect A&E. And one of the audience members is curious to know if there's any funding out there for pollinator parks. Clearly, pollinators are really important. How's that being tackled in your campaign?
Well, the campaign is really about making our own areas of pollinating friendly planting, really. So not necessarily plants, but your garden, your balcony, and window boxes. So you don't have to have a massive amount of space. And really what we know about pollinating insects is they're struggling because of urbanization in urban areas, and that they do use gardens to rest, to drink, to feed. So they are so important because they take up so much space within the UK, and that gardens can actually help boost numbers of pollinating insects. So it's not necessarily about funding for parks. It's more about getting individuals interested in pollinating insects and planting plants which will encourage pollinating insects to visit gardens and help rescue them. So if you do go to the Bumblebee Trust or the Butterfly Conservation website, all the information is on there, and they can actually send you some seeds as well to grow in your garden, which are full of bee-friendly and butterfly-friendly plants.
Fantastic, thank you. Question for you, David. You were talking about, and you gave some examples of school programs. Are you considering or doing any work with central government, like Department of Education, in terms of trying to get more green activities into the curriculum?
Yeah, we are. I mean, we are. I mean, there's a long answer to that question. I'll try and get. I mean, the government's 25-year environment plan actually did have quite a lot in there about integrating nature with schools, and there are programs being created actually between the Department for Environment and the Department for Education. So actually it's quite a progressive move. So there is a realization that there needs to be much more work, much more deeper work with children from a primary and secondary school level with nature and outdoor programs. There's a lot happening. We, as an organisation, we're trying to contribute to that conversation, obviously in different ways. There are coalitions of organisations working specifically to advocate for certain types of interventions and programs. So there is quite a lot going on in that space. And Ofsted is a big player in that, to actually have Ofsted also see outdoor learning as a core part of their mechanism for assessing schools, and that's got a long way to go as well. So that's another route that we are looking at. It's the Department for Education is a tricky one to access. Frankly, it's huge, and the reality with schools as well is schools and the department itself has 1,001 approaches all the time from different organisations, asking different things, offering different things. So it's quite a noisy space. Probably what we need to do is work more clearly as a set of organisations together with a single message, rather than all coming at organisations and influencers with different requests. There's probably work to do from a collaborative perspective from the sector as a whole.
And Paul, if I could just ask you a similar question to you, because you did mention forest schools, which is another approach whereby the kids are actually going into community forest areas as opposed to bringing, if you like, the nature into the playground. Anything to add on what David was saying in terms of how we get more involvement with the curriculum?
No, I think similar to David, it's a difficult landscape to work in. I think there's some progress, and we know there's a huge appetite from schools to do more learning outside. And what we try to do is to facilitate that by providing opportunities for teacher training and work with Liverpool John Moores University, in particular. I know Zoe from LJMU is on the line. So with them, we've set up a natural curriculum hub that helps to train newly qualifying teachers. So they're going out with already some basic qualifications about how to engage children in the outdoors and how to teach the curriculum outside. And post-COVID, maybe outdoor learning becomes even more important. Yes.
Dan, can I, this is a question that perhaps I can ask a couple of people, but we hear the phrase shovel-ready jobs when we think about how can we help get some people back to work whose jobs may not be returning as we recover from the pandemic, and the opportunities within a green recovery for new green jobs. Within, say, Bathscape as an example, are there immediate job or employment opportunities within that program?
I think we're hoping there's going to be more. What we're concentrating on is training that allows people to work towards that. So particularly people who aren't in employment or education, we have 6-week programs for those AQA registered programs for conservation work. There's also lots and lots of volunteering opportunities. I think it's always been a crowded field for people who would wish to work in those areas. But it seems as though the wind is in the sails for that to happen more. We hope that the Environment Bill and kind of emergency works that will start to develop further. And I think there's certainly a need for it. I can't say that they're ready as yet. But if we are going to be planting a lot more trees in a short time scale, for instance, then we should see those coming online soon, I would hope.
And Paul, because the Mersey Forest Project is on a very large scale, are there many shovel-ready jobs in terms of the various programs that you have in play currently?
Yes, so I think we're on the, we can't say too much, but probably is the answer. So
watch this space.
Watch this space, yeah. So we should know in the next month or so. There might be quite a, not just in Mersey Forest, but across the community forests in England, there could be quite a significant number of opportunities available. That's a bit cryptic, sorry, but
no, it sounds very promising. It's a very optimistic note.
Rick, just
to finish.
To add from my perspective on that, I mean, to start with, it feels like there needs to be a lot more work done and actually making more of a job market for what we do. Actually, it's not very easy sometimes to find the right people, whether they're foresters, whether they're arboriculturists. There's still quite a shortage of the right skills in the sector. When we're recruiting for roles, although it feels like lots of people want to be working in the environmental sector these days, is the message you get. Actually, we really struggle to recruit for certain roles. It feels like we as a sector still need to make people feel confident that there are jobs out there. We need to pay the right salaries. We need to have the right training. There's quite a lot. This isn't in itself could be a whole new webinar, but there is quite a lot there to really create the workforce, the green workforce of the future.
Yeah. Thank you. Just conscious of time and the fact we're actually, unfortunately, running the clock down. So I'd like to, by way of a wrap-up, ask each of you the same question and just hear the different perspectives that you have in terms of your answers. And maybe, Amir, if I can just ask you first, what would be your one piece of advice for us about how we transform or can transform our communities with nature?
For me, it's about inclusion and including everyone. And it sounds like lots of people are thinking about that already, listening to the other speakers. I do work in an inner city area. It's a very socially deprived part of Bradford I work in. I go into people's houses. I can see what kind of chaotic lives that they live. And, often just getting your kids to school washed and dressed is all that they can manage for that day. And that is fine. And the idea of then, having a talk to them about well, actually, these kind of green areas, these trees and these spaces will be really, really good for you. It's a real disconnect for them. And it can often feel like inaccessible, not necessarily through distance, but also through social class. And that is the bit of the puzzle that I would like to see fixed, really, and put into place. And it's great that a lot of these projects are happening within inner cities, and these kind of communities are being included. But I still think there's a big part of them that are excluded, and it's not necessarily about race or BAME people. It's often social class, and the two can often go hand in hand together. And I think an individual kind of approach to those people, having people from within those communities involved in these projects to engage them, I think is really, really important.
Thank you. David, similar question to you. What would be your one piece of advice to us about transforming our communities through nature?
I think for me, echoing what I was saying earlier, it would be really an appeal to local authorities to really think as progressively as possible about using the available green spaces to do more with them. There's a lot of green space out there, actually, even in inner city areas, a lot of underused, poorly used, even if they're small plots of pocket parks or around estates. They could be, there's so much more we could do with those, and so much more we could get community involved in owning those spaces and designing them and actually using them and actually making the most of what we've got available. But that really involves local authorities, as we've heard with Bristol, to really set those ambitious strategies to transform the green space that we have, and to set aside the budgets to do so as well. So it's an appeal to local authorities to have that ambition.
Thank you. Paul, same question to you.
Yeah, so mine would be that these things don't happen overnight, and that time is often the most important part of what we do. So having a long-term view and recognising that there will be ups and downs. Sometimes the natural environment will be flavour of the month, other times we think we're totally ignored, but to stick with it for the long term, that's what actually makes the changes in towns and cities for sorts of things we're trying to do.
And Dan, from your perspective, you're all about the landscapes. What's your one piece of advice about how we transform our communities through landscapes?
I would say partnerships. So it's similar, going back to what David was saying, having local authorities who are there for the long term, having charities, organisations such as represented here, but also local groups within an area. I think at the moment, when money's tight and the funding pots are short, it's tempting just to focus on your own organisation or your own little piece of the jigsaw, but it's far much stronger if we can join together and recognise those opportunities. So I think seeing who could be active in the area and taking those people with you is the key.
Thank you. I think for me, in terms of wrapping up, one of the things that really stands out is the breadth of benefits that we derive from nature-based solutions. So, clearly starting from where Amir kicked off in terms of the immediate health and well-being benefits to us as individuals and also communities. But then it starts to become much broader, this idea of, it's about more than trees. We start to empower communities. There's local job opportunities that we're hearing about, learning new skills, play, recreation. And this is all on top of the vital ecosystem benefits that nature's providing. We heard about water management and flood management. Clearly, there's climate mitigation. There's protecting biodiversity. And so nature-based solutions is very unique in terms of the breadth of benefits that it provides to us. I think the other thing that I take away is this idea of thinking big locally and how we integrate nature into that idea. And I think some of the examples that you have shared with us today really brings that to life, not only in terms of just like the inspiration, but also the action. There's very tangible projects, and they're very big projects that are already being implemented or are in the pipeline. And that's a very exciting place for us to be. I share, David, your hope that we can get more and more councils behind this. Certainly, they have declared that ambition in terms of tackling the climate emergency. And there are lots of great ideas that have been shared in terms of how we can make that golden thread between the two. So on that note, I'd like to thank Dr. Amir Khan, Dan Merrett, David Elliott, and Paul, who's just unfortunately skipped out. It was also really good to hear from Councillor Asher Craig, even though unfortunately we weren't even able to involve her in the Q&A. Carbon copy, the idea really is for us to inspire and enable local climate action through the examples of others. And I hope we've done a bit of that today. If you want to see what other events we have, please go to our website, carboncopy.eco. We are collating local examples of climate action projects all the time and posting them online. And so if you have any that you would like to share, please do get in touch. And I'd like to leave you with a quote from author Will Rogers. "Show me a healthy community with a healthy economy, and I will show you a community that understands the relationship between the built and the unbuilt environment." Thank you, everybody, and thank you to our audience.